Hey, I'm Tori Wilson, head of data and growth at Recce.
And I'm CL, CEO and founder of Recce. Welcome to Data Renegades. Today, our guest is Wes McKinney. Wes McKinney is the author of Pandas, the Python library that fundamentally changed how the world does data analysis. He also co-created Apache Arrow, the open standard that power much of the modern data infrastructure. I think over the years, he tackles the important gaps in data infra piece by piece. Well, as a developer, as a founder, and also as an investor. He's currently a principal architect at Posit. Uh, well, welcome to the show, Wes.
Thanks for having me.
I just
Yeah,
want to add to your Python for data analysis. Incredible. It's what allowed me to go from economics to data science. It was like, because I was an R user. So helped me get a job in the industry. So just like, love that book. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, right now I'm having like this almost like this existential thought of like maybe people are not going to read books like Python for data analysis anymore. I'm actually working on the fourth edition of the book, but there is a part of me that is concerned that like that whole media might be dead in a year or 2 years. It's like people are just not going to read books to learn how to do stuff anymore. So I guess we can talk more about that as we get into
Yeah.
the conversation. But it's true that the book did help a lot of people in the past, and I'm happy that it exists and it served a really useful purpose to help people get over the hurdle of beginning to use Python and learning how to use pandas and growing that ecosystem of software. So even if people don't read it in the future, I'm still okay. It had a pretty good run. It's been 14 years since the first edition came out, so it's been a pretty good run.
Like, I mean,
yeah, we're so
changed my career.
yeah, we're so thrilled to have you here. It's like you have this massive experience and wisdom about like creating like Pandas like 20 years ago, right? And then Arrow like 10 years ago, and all the other projects they're working on nowadays.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
really
yeah.
I really like to go where I'm needed. So I think in 2008, like I felt that I was needed to work on what turned into pandas, and so I that really motivated me. That I felt like there was this potential for Python, and so I felt a lot of satisfaction to you know s- perceive the need and then fill that gap. And when we started the Arrow project 10 years ago, this month is actually the 10th birthday of Arrow. I also had that same feeling of like, here's a problem that needs to be solved, and I feel like I can contribute here and I feel needed. And so, of course, right now, like having the same thoughts about agentic software engineering. And so yeah, a little bit down that rabbit hole at the moment. We'll see where things lead in the future.
We'll definitely
But
get
yeah,
in that in a bit.
yep, yep. So when you went taking a step back, like full time on Pandas, like what made you decide to do that jump? Because that's like an unpaid open source like library.
It was an experiment, I will say. I was fortunate in that I graduated from college without any student loan debt, and so that was one massive enabler. And that I could at 20, let's see, wait, how old was I when I worked full? I dropped out of grad school and I worked full time on Pandas. I was 26. So I moved to New York City. I had some money saved up for my first job, which was in finance. So I had no debt. I had saved about a year's worth of living expenses from my job. I lived very very frugally in those days, and so I basically I figured, well, the worst that could happen is that I spend all my savings and I build a really interesting software project and maybe it goes nowhere, but at least I will have tried. And so I think, in 26-year-old lizard brain, I felt like that was the gamble that I was willing to make. And even if I ended up being wrong and Pandas wasn't that useful, that I just felt like I had to really give it 110%. And so I was living in a mouse-infested uh, apartment in the East Village in New York City. Literally, like there were mice. Like I trapped like a bunch of mice, and so I was just like, I would just wake up and write Python code. I'd take a break to eat and go to yoga, and then I would come back home, like eat dinner and work until the late hours. And so I was just going from like basically probably 8 o'clock in the morning until midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning pretty much every day, 7 days a week. From that for that like year or so,
That's
and
founder hours.
yeah. So I was working founder hours,
Yeah,
working on pandas, and that's also the same period that I wrote the first version of Python for data analysis. So I was kind of working on writing, building pandas, and at that point, I was working with two of my former colleagues from AQR, the company where I worked, when I started the pandas project. So Adam Klein and Chang She, so they were working with me at that point, and so we were working on pandas, and then I would flip between working on pandas and writing the book, and then often I would come to like empty sections in the book or stuff that I felt like should be in the book, and I'm like, well, I guess I have to write that part of pandas now so that I can write the so that I can write the section in the book to make the whole story complete. So pandas in 2011 was essentially and 2012 was essentially book driven development, quite literally. So,
Yep.
sometimes like projects are like documentation driven development,
Or
like
conference
you
driven.
conference driven development, but
yeah.
this was book driven development.
Well, that's the agentic future, maybe right there, where you're writing books to help feed the LLMs what they need to build next.
Maybe. I guess the question is like, do the LLMs even need books? Like maybe, yeah, they can generate all of their own content, and just reading our code bases and our test suites, they can generate their own. It'd be kind of fun as like an experiment to like just point. I think the problem is that the LLMs their knowledge is a little bit too contaminated on all their training data about pandas. But you could imagine if you had a brand new project that you built, entirely from scratch now, and then you pointed LLMs at it and asked them to write a book about this new project. I'm sure they would oblige and write the book. What I don't know is whether the book would be any good. Like I've created a few new software projects with agents in the last 4 months, and I haven't thought about asking them to write a book about them, but maybe I should. Why not? It seems like they probably would generate a bunch of slop, probably nothing that I could necessarily sell online, but it would be an interesting experiment to see if it like, how bad it is relative to kind of an artisanally created, human created book.
Yeah.
Well, you've been
I
also
guess
like collecting like spicy takes, right? So let the authors of spicy takes write those books in their voices.
Yeah, well, that's a funny thing because I had this problem where I love reading blogs and have for years, probably for I don't know. I started reading blog posts in right when I got out of college. When I was working, we would send around blog posts about software engineering, data science, like the emerging field of data science, like legendary bloggers like Paul Graham, Joel Spolsky, things like that,
PG.
Martin Fowler, and so I used to love reading all those. And then now, of course, blogging has become almost like a full time job for some people. Like people are making enough off their Substacks to make a living. Like they're creating media companies just doing like YouTube content and Substacks. And I had this problem where I would often read a blog post that I really liked, and I would send it to a bunch of my data friends, like my engineer friends, and they almost invariably the response would be, "I don't have time to read a 2,000 word Substack. Can you tell me what it's about?" And so that, and I, of course, now with LLMs, I'm like, okay, well, I can solve that problem of like, just give me the TLDR on this blog post. Like, tell me what it's about. If the writer said anything like spicy or provocative or interesting, like show me those 5 or 6 things. And that's how spicytakes.org was born earlier, essentially, I think last month, basically. So just you know, one vibe coding session after another, and now I have a whole website with like 23 blogs and 31,000 spicy quotes from all those blogs. So it's a fun little side project. And of course, if anyone has
What's
any ideas for like blogs to contribute, I'm actually working on Joel Spolsky's blog right now. Like today, actually, I started scraping and processing the Joel on Software blog, which is like he has over 1,000 posts, and so that's a lot of content to chug through, even with a very hungry Claude Max subscription. So, but I'll get through it eventually.
yeah? What are a
Yeah.
couple of the takes you remember most that are top of mind?
Gosh, well, I have to go to spicytakes.org. There's even like an analytics dashboard, so you don't even have to dig. You can just say
Yeah.
like,
Spicy score.
what's the spiciest stuff that Paul Graham said, and like I don't know, 2020. Haters are just
It's a
fanboys
lot.
with the sign switched. If you believe there's nothing true that you can say, then anyone who gets in trouble for something they say must deserve it. So it's like, yeah, it's you could just click around. It's fun. It's
Yeah.
totally not for any professional purpose. Just like it's fun. And now, like whenever somebody published, I really like Ben Stansel's blog. Like
Hmm.
he's
Yeah.
founder of Mode, and I read his Substack every week, and it's fun to read, but also like again, a lot of people don't have time to read Substacks, and now like whenever a new blog post comes out, I go to my terminal tab for spicy takes, and I ask Claude to add the new Substack post to Ben's spicy take site. So anyway, just little things that I'm amusing myself with in this new world of agentic engineering. It's great.
Yeah. And for
Yeah, I
our
think this is
listeners, we
just
did an earlier episode with Ben Stansel, so feel free to
Cool.
check that out as well.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel this is so amazing time to reimagine everything. Like you're literally like doing a RSS reader that's smarter, right? And then you're building like email archiving thing, and then um, yeah. But we are supposed to talk about data first, and then AI.
Well, these are all in a sense data, like
Data.
different kinds of data problems. Like I feel like building tools to process and curate. I like mash together like process and curate. It's like process and curate knowledge.
Mm,
It is a data problem, but I feel like we've never had not until now have we had the ability to do this much like intelligent data processing and curation and at a cost that is tiny. Like I think the maybe I basically spicytakes.org was all paid for out of my AI subscriptions. And so,
mm,
the maximum cost was essentially a few $100s more or less. And so to be able to create something like that at such a small cost is frankly like pretty impressive. And so I think it is a big question right now, like what do we do with this new power that we have? Like every day I jump out of bed and it's like I was joking with friends like that there's like the meme of like He-Man with the sword like it's like by the power of Grayskull, like I have the power. And it's like I wake up and like every morning I'm like I have the power. Like what do I use the power for? And I think data problems, like certainly I expect that we'll make a lot more progress on a lot of like understanding of data systems and figuring out what to do next. I also am concerned that the LLMs are just not good enough to do like build Arrow, for example. Like we
mm-hmm,
built Arrow 10 years ago. I think it's the type of problem that is difficult enough and nuanced enough that if you tried to throw LLMs like coding agents at building Apache Arrow from scratch, you would get a much worse product than the one that was like carefully, intricately designed, by humans over a long period of time. Like it's a project, like Arrow is a project that has the intricacy of like a fine Swiss watch. Like there's a lot of
mm-hmm.
very small details that were, created like very painstakingly over a long period of time. And uh, I just don't, LLMs like coding agents need time to deliberate and come up with ideas. And I think you would have to be willing to like have the agents generate 100 ideas and maybe you only pick one. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe in the future like that's what software engineering will look like, is that you have the armies of agentic monkeys on keyboards, typing away, coming up with all these different ideas, and then you have some
Mm-hmm.
way of like using other agents to figure out like judge all the ideas and figure out which ones are good. Like try not to accept anything that's overcomplicated and whatnot. But anyway,
Or maybe not ideas, but like pick the implementation that makes sense.
I digress, but I'm more than happy to talk more about. I've been kind of vibing on agentic engineering and all the fun AI stuff that I'm doing these days. But yeah, I think my field is like I'm a data professional. I've worked on data science tools and data system software for most of my career, and I think it's in many ways like data engineering and data processing systems, database systems are maybe one of the last frontiers of like AI resistant
Mm.
technology. And so I think it's still an area where there's still a lot of work to do. Like we still need to build file formats and processing engines and, metadata, scalable metadata management and all these things. And, I'm less concerned about those things being vibe coded.
Yeah.
or
Well,
concerned
actually,
that they
double
are bad
click.
coded. Go ahead.
I was going to say, actually, tell us a little bit more about that because I'll say, we speak to a lot of people in the data field. I personally have a wide variety of friends in data, and there's definitely like this tension about are our jobs being gone, right? You have people that are like one data person can do the job of five, right? You have the end-to-end data person. So here, like, tell me more about kind of this optimism you have of like there's a frontier left if people are wondering where should I be moving to?
Well, I think that the coding agents and the frontier LLMs have definitely made a lot of progress in text to SQL, for example, but they still struggle to generate correct SQL in complex real world schemas. So in contrived benchmarks, they often perform well in text to SQL tasks,
Okay.
but when you actually go to apply the frontier foundation models in, ERP, like enterprise resource planning systems and like the actual real world database schemas that exist in large institutions that have been building and curating their database schemas over a long period of time, they begin to struggle because there's a lot of subtleties in the relationships between tables and essentially what's necessary to generate semantically correct SQL. Like I was just at the CIDR database conference, and Michael Stonebreaker, one of the godfathers of modern
Hmm.
database systems, gave a talk about exactly this, which is that he and some research collaborators developed they call it the Beaver, like the Beaver benchmark for text to SQL. Basically, it's a very, very difficult eval for text to SQL, where they found in I think it was this real world schema that's found inside the inside MIT, basically the databases that power the Massachusetts
Pandas.
Institute of Technology, like the institution, and that the foundation models weren't able to generate correct SQL to do things in the schema that powers the organization. And so I think that's an area where I think semantic models are one thing that is important to do there. So there's a number of semantic modeling languages that are being developed right now. There's companies doing semantic modeling. I've been really excited about Malloy, which is Lloyd Tabb's like successor to LookML, which was the semantic modeling language that powered Looker, which is like the most successful BI product of the last generation.
Hmm.
And and so Malloy is like a next generation version of that. And so there's a company called Credible Data where I'm an investor, full disclosure, that are working on essentially like headless business intelligence and like building a platform for people to create agentic data experiences, but where the data modeling like semantic layer is managed by Malloy. And I think that that's going to be really important to like reduce the complexity of the query generation problem. Otherwise,
Hmm.
like people are just going to be pointing Codex or Claude Code at their production databases and like blowing their feet off basically with the kind of agents generating. Well, the trouble is that a lot of people are going to be generating complex SQL queries and they aren't even going to read the queries. So they're going to look at the dashboard and they're going to be like, seems okay. Like, and so, but how do you verify if the SQL queries are correct? Like if they execute, okay, that's one thing, but you actually will, Ben Stansel wrote a blog post about this. He called it like the vibe and verify revolution, and how like analytics and data engineering is probably one of the areas that is at present time like most resistant to being fully vibe coded, because there's just too many there's too much subtleness in understanding how how the database schemas work, and like what are correct measures and correct, how to write the queries correctly. And maybe you could argue that we should be restructuring our database schemas to be better for agents, and we'll probably do that too. But it's clear that like all the reinforcement learning in the world and all the pre and post training in the world has like not been good enough yet. And maybe it just means that OpenAI and Anthropic are going to have to staff a team to do reinforcement learning on this problem to get the quality of the model's output up to a level where they can perform at a 99% level, and maybe right now it's like a 70% level. I haven't looked at the evals exactly to tell you
Hmm.
where it is, but sense is that it's like not it's like not in the 90th percentile. It's like much worse than that
Mhm.
now in like the hard benchmarks.
So what I'm hearing is that for LLM to directly generate SQL, there's like two problems, right? You either generate very complex thing that human cannot comprehend, so you don't have a good way to tell if it's good or bad. And then like things, it's almost like an intermediate abstraction or representation. Like Malloy will have something that's higher level that human can comprehend. It's kind of sit in between like human and machine that you can kind of become a communication tool, right? Is that what you're saying?
Right. Yeah. Because the idea is that things like Malloy or there's other semantic modeling languages or like frameworks, but they serve to reduce the dimensionality of what the LLMs have to reason about. So they provide guardrails for like you have the semantic model which defines the table relationships, because that's one of the hardest things is understanding like the join relationships. Is it a one-to-one join? Is it a one-to-many? Is it a many-to-many join? And so that's one layer of complexity. There's been a lot of over the years with analytics and BI on the modern data stack. There's been a lot of work on like having shared metrics systems and
Hmm.
get like have everyone in the organization like put all their metrics in one place, and so that you aren't having like different teams computing different business KPIs in their own custom way, which maybe is wrong or like is missing some subtlety of like counting wrong. There's all these like details that's involved with like generating correct measures for dashboards. But I
Which
it's a
very
little
few
it's yeah.
companies actually succeed in doing. I
Right.
feel
And
like it's
it is
done,
like it,
but
it is a
it's
hard problem, but
yeah.
like that domain is also like littered with the dead and broken bodies of like many startups that have tried and failed to solve this problem. And like I think many of them end up looking like this should just be a feature of like a full stack BI platform. And those it turns out that the full stack BI platforms are the ones that have been the most successful, like Looker being, the one of the flagship examples of that. But I'm actually not an expert in this area. Like my work has always been a little bit BI adjacent. Like I
Hmm.
used Tableau in the late 2000s before it was cool. Circa 2007, 2000 was really cool for me, and I did a lot of cool stuff. I think with Tableau, but seeing some of the advanced business intelligence that people do now, like the stuff I was doing was pretty derpy by comparison. So, but I definitely know more about like my area has been more like data frame libraries, file formats. Like I've done a lot of work on Parquet. Like I had a heavy hand in designing Arrow and kind of the protocol and like the libraries around Arrow, and so a little bit more of like where the data meets the metal kind of thing. So because initially like building pandas, I didn't know anything about database systems or how to build a data processing engine. And so I think at that time, circa 2008, I was 23. Like I had a math background, but not a computer science or database systems background. So there was no way that I was going to be able to like, just come up with the idea of building a database engine basically. And I started giving talks like once I learned the mistakes that I'd made, that Pandas wasn't built like a database. uh, I started giving talks about like Pandas isn't designed like a database. It probably should have been, but I didn't know what I was doing whenever I started the project. Of course, the funny thing is like it didn't need to. Like Pandas was, primarily most people use it on small data, and it would have been over engineered to build something like polars. And so now like people legitimately need something like polars to do large scale multi-core data processing with an API that is, data frame API. But if I had taken 3 years longer to get something useful into the market to do things the right way, it would have been too late. So like people in 2000, 2010, 2011, people needed solutions right now. They needed to be able to read CSV files. They needed to be able to do basic data wrangling. If the data fit into memory, if you couldn't handle many gigabytes of data, like it was fine because most people just had Excel spreadsheets and CSV files that weren't that big. And so the fact that it was like inefficient or didn't scale, like it didn't matter because it solved the problems that people had, and it was fast enough, and it had the features that they needed to be able to get their work done.
Good founding lesson
Yeah, indeed.
also.
Yeah, I guess a good lesson to like don't over engineer, like yeah, ship it's better. It's if you can get something to market faster that solves a problem. That's worth a lot. And often, I think founders and system builders are frustrated when like not the best solutions are the ones that are the most popular or the most financially successful. And like the only thing that I made money from Pandas was book royalties, which are like, just a drop in the bucket compared to the money that people make from successful startups. But, you know, it wasn't I didn't build Pandas to make money. It was about making Python into a data language that people could adopt and begin to trust in a business setting. And in 2000, Python was not a mainstream language for business data work. It
Yeah.
was considered like a kind of a niche scripting language, basically, and it had a small scientific computing community, but it wasn't like, it was not considered a safe language to adopt for mission critical work, if that makes sense.
So what made you decide to believe so deeply in like that pandas needed to exist then?
Well, I think fundamentally it was about the human ergonomics of the Python programming language,
Mm.
the language itself, its readability, conciseness, like the fact that there was no types in those days. And actually, like, I embrace and appreciate typing in Python, but I feel like if Python had had typing 20 years ago, it would have been worse because it would have hampered the ergonomics of the language. Like part of the beauty of why people really enjoyed Python was that they could express complex ideas and manipulate data in an interpreted language. You could express complex ideas very concisely, things that might take you 100 lines of Java or C++ code you could do in 3 or 4 lines of Python. And so I think initially that benefited people doing scripting, like basically little automations and glue code and doing things that you could do in Perl, but with like code that was much nicer to look at and read. And so the fact that Python was designed as a teaching language, it was designed for readability and like ease of writing and ease of reading as well. And so when I started building kind of a little personal data toolkit, I also was using IPython. So there was no Jupyter. It was just the IPython terminal experience before it was even Jupyter. And so I felt like, we have solid bones here. We had NumPy, SciPy, Matplotlib, and we had the Python interpreter, Python language, really nice to program in. We had IPython. And all that was missing was like a data toolkit that could read CSV files, that can read data out of databases, that can assist with like doing stuff that you might do in SQL or you might do with like Unix tools, awk, sed, and grep, basically, but essentially give you a nice API that would provide what you could do in what you could do in R with data frames. And so it was definitely just a bet that this was something that people would want and that people would adopt and be happy with. But it was something that I needed for the work that I was doing. And I found that I really enjoyed programming in Python. And so initially it was just a personal data toolkit, but it was working with other users, like introducing them to Python, people who'd never programmed in Python before, looking at the way that they worked now, especially looking at people who are heavy Excel users. And then I would show them what it could look like if they were using a programming language to script and automate the stuff that they were doing in Excel, but using early versions of Pandas. So writing Python scripts and running them in IPython, interacting with the data frames. And I found that people really liked it. And so I quickly got into this like feedback loop with users where I started to see people become really empowered by the combination of Python and Pandas. And so that was what gave me the belief that like there's something here. Like if this can just become more feature complete, if it more functionally complete, like serve a broader set of users, make it really well documented, like have a book about it, then it could become really really big and successful. But again, like these were just gut feelings. Like I had no real evidence to support it. It was purely like just like just felt like the right thing to do.
I mean, if you're getting people to turn off Excel and learn another language, I mean, that's a pretty strong sign,
Well, I mean, but
especially in finance.
yeah, in finance, yes, but people have a lot of Excel experience. They get, I've seen people that have like all the Excel keyboard shortcuts memorized, and so you watch them like running an Excel spreadsheet, it's like they're playing an organ basically, and really impressive. I've seen some really impressive Excel users in my life. But it's very manual, and any type of automation would end up getting built in Visual Basic,
Mm.
which is like a whole special kind of hell. So, so I think like just getting to that like breakthrough aha moment of like, look at what the Excel workflow looks like, especially when you would want to like automate a bunch of like similar types of analyses, and people would like manually set up different Excel spreadsheets that would replicate, they would like copy the sheet and like tweak it a little bit. And that would be the way that they iterate. And so I'm like, well, you just get out of the spreadsheet and everything is just Python code. And you can, you can mold it and make it reproducible, and you can have it generate Excel spreadsheets for you. And you could even do that in those days. And so I think getting to that aha moment of like, oh, just recognizing that there's an ability to automate this work that was very manual or like tedious in Excel in the past, like that was, I think, what was necessary to get people to like cross the chasm, so to speak.
I think there's nothing more satisfying than what you're describing, like the early kind of a new open source project, finding this user, interacting with them, and like actually like, wow, this is something I wasn't sure about, but people love it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
How do you think your experiences building Pandas and Arrow have informed now that you're on the other side of the table, so to speak, as a VC?
As an investor,
Investor, yeah, yeah,
yeah,
sorry.
I hesitate to call myself a VC. I do have a small fund, but it's composed ventures. It's an outgrowth of the angel investing that I was doing. So
Mm,
I still view it as angel investing, but like angel investing with like slightly larger checks and investing my own money as well as other people's money.
mhm.
But so I'm not aspiring to become a full-time investor, but I think when I talk to companies about investing, it's often very relationship based. Like I've the investments that have been most rewarding to me, where I've been able to help the most, have been ones that are very like, especially companies where I have some connection to either the underlying technology or I know the founders. I've been investing in a lot of companies that use Arrow, for example. So one of the reasons for setting up Compose was I wanted to explain to the world that I have this investment thesis around Arrow companies that are all in on using Arrow, using data fusion, basically adopting and leveraging the Arrow ecosystem of technologies. And so I think the majority of the companies that I've invested in the last 3 or 4 years have been companies that are using Arrow in some capacity. Of course, you could argue that like we're getting to a point where, there's fewer companies that aren't using Arrow than are using Arrow. Many people are using Arrow without even realizing it,
Okay.
which is I think a good place to be. But generally, like what I'm looking for in when talking to founders, and especially if I'm introduced to a company that I've never met before, founders I don't know, maybe a new technology, is that sort of looking for alignment between people's background and experience and the problem that they're solving. Like, is there a reason why you are the right people to solve this problem? Do you have the right background? Do you have the fundamental motivation why you should solve this problem? And so, typically I'm looking to see like that articulation of like, what is it that got you fired up to solve this problem? And sometimes with startups, like sometimes the answer is that they feel like it's a way to build a successful company and make money, which is completely valid. But many companies do have like there's this like deep down like desire to solve a problem that they experienced in the past. And so I think the running joke is like people start like people saw the next companies that people found are to solve the problems that they experienced, like, you know, unrelated problems from like the last company that they worked
Yep.
on. Like a famous example is that the founders of Ksplice, which was a
Kernel thing, right? Live
Linux
update.
kernel hot live update. They went on to found Zulip, a chat company,
Yeah.
and Pilot, a bookkeeping company. And so, yeah, it's like It's like we
They
weren't happy
experience
with
that.
the state of bookkeeping, and we weren't happy with the state of workplace communications. And so now the founders of Ksplice are now doing, well, they did Zulip, which got acquired by Dropbox, and then now, Tim Abbott and some others are doing Zulip as a standalone company, and Jessica McKellar and others are doing Pilot. So but again, right? These are examples of where having firsthand experience with the problem that's being solved is definitely very helpful. Obviously, you have to go out and like do user interviews and understand, like, is it just you that has this problem, or do other people have the problem too? And then, of course, you have to try to quantify like how many people have that problem and what's their willingness to pay for a solution. Like maybe they're willing to pay for a solution, but they don't want to be locked in on a vendor, and so it's gotten even more complex. And of course, now with AI, I feel like the table has been completely flipped, where the bar for adopting a third party, like a software vendor, is that much higher, because
Mm.
now not only is it like, am I comfortable buying software from this vendor and being dependent on them, but there's also the calculus of, can I just have somebody on my engineering team,
Spend a weekend.
spend 3 weeks with Claude Code and
Yeah.
build a replacement. And people are doing that, anecdotally, not at maybe quite the scale that's being claimed in the news and the tech media, but it's, to a certain extent that is happening.
Oh, yeah. I'm doing that personally right now about building out like a couple different side projects where, yeah, there's like tools. Like one of them is I want basically like an LLM document editor, but where I can like at different models and like have conversations and all of this stuff. And CL shared with me, I forget the name of the company that had kind of built something similar, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted. But I'm like, me and Claude, we can get exactly what I want. And
That's
it's
right.
just for
Yeah.
me,
You
Personal
can
software.
have
Yeah.
Right now, you can have exactly what you want. You no longer have to make compromises and not have the thing that you want. And I think it's frankly kind of wonderful. But also, I mean, think of it this way. It also creates, in a sense, like, I'm planning to write a blog post about this at some point. I've been kicking around this idea in my head, and is that I think that AI in a way is going to create this wave of what I would describe as radical accountability for creators of software projects, where you do not have to accept things being mediocre, things being bad anymore. And it is much easier now to reject a solution that is mediocre. And, if I interact with somebody that's building a software project, I'm not even like, um, that's the word, like gentle about giving the feedback. I'm like, this is bad. Like, why haven't you fixed this yet? Like, if I was on your engineering team, I would have already fixed this. I would have done it like today with Claude Code. Why have you not fixed it yet? And if, I think a lot of software vendors are as a result are being caught flat-footed by their newly empowered customers, who are
Mm.
essentially no longer going to put up with their mediocrity. And so I do think that this new like radical accountability is going to be a good thing for the software industry, because basically any software vendors that continue to ship mediocre software, like, they're going to lose all their business. People are going to say, like, what? Like, you just have, like, it used to be the excuse was, we can't afford the engineering time to do it the right way.
Higher
And
priority
now,
stuff, right?
and now the only excuse is that, like, you don't know what the right thing to do is, or you have bad taste. Usually it's like some combination of both. Like, oh, we don't have good ideas, or we don't have good taste. Like, it's one of the two, maybe both. And, personally, like, I'm happy to just let all those companies go extinct. Like, just out with you. Seriously. No, like, that's, again, radical accountability. I'm like, you don't know what's the right thing to do. Like, you can't be bothered to sit down and do it the right way to make it better. Like, in Ben Stansel's words, like, basically, out with the garbage, basically. And I think a lot of these kind of old and crusty kind of incumbent systems
Mm.
that have just stayed bad for so long, like, I don't know, like, think of like every expense management system I've ever used. Like, why are they so bad? Like even like Expensify, like, I hate to like criticize a tool that I pay for, and that I think is like the least bad expense management tool. Like it still doesn't have keyboard navigation. Like why? Like seriously, why? Like, and the fact that it's still like even now today, like they built some kind of like, AI native, new Expensify, and I logged into it and it was terrible. And so I went through their support system and I was like, please, like just give me the classic, like not AI native Expensify, because like whatever you have done here is totally awful.
Wrong.
So
Yeah.
but I think like basically people are going to look at all these tools that they paid for and maybe like, you know, Expensify, maybe not the best example, but if you had a team of people, maybe you have a 30-person company, you might be paying $300 a month for Expensify. Pretty sure you could probably have somebody vibe code a better
Hmm.
solution, and maybe, one person, with a $200 Claude Max plan, like maybe
Hmm.
you could, maybe you could vibe code your way out of that problem, maybe with some security holes and bugs and things like that. But anyway, I'm very excited about where it like just the, you know, I think somebody described what's happening right now is I wish I could accredit them with the analogy, but it's not my idea. But essentially, is describing what we're experiencing as like a great wildfire. Like we have the world is full of like dead wood and dead trees and stuff that basically just needs to be burned to the ground. And so I think that 2026 is going to be about swatching kind of the software industry, like take a look at everything that is bad, everything that is mediocre, and burning it all to the ground, and let 1,000 new trees grow fresh, probably a lot faster than they would have in the past because people can build new solutions a lot more quickly. But anyway, so that's kind of my soapbox, like kind of where I think where things are headed. But like now, like I'm like my patience has run out when I interact with a bad software product, like a bad SaaS product. I'm just like, why? Like this, there's no excuse for this anymore, really. Like radical accountability. Like I'm just like burn it down. Like I want better expense management tools. Like I want email that doesn't suck. Like why is it so hard to find stuff in Gmail? Like I don't know. They apparently Gemini has some new like AI inbox. Like I looked at it, it
That
doesn't
is
look like what I
horrible.
want. So I don't want that. Let's yeah, I just say yeah, just radical accountability. Let's burn it down. Let's make things good. We can make it good. I believe we can.
I
Well,
look
I have
forward to
two
reading
follow
that
ups
on
here.
the spicy takes. Sorry, go ahead, Dory.
Two follow ups. So, one, since the bar is higher, how do you see that impacting startups? As somebody who, is an ex founder and has a bunch of people that are still living the journey, may they continue. And then, like, how, like, just the bar is higher to get to that MVP, I assume.
That's right. Yeah.
Like, what does that mean for like the earliest stage of like, us trying to get going?
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly at the earliest stage of a company, um, I mean, basically, if you come to a pitch and you have nothing to demo, like that's almost a red flag at this point.
Yeah.
It's like what you didn't build a prototype. Like it used to be you could justify not building a prototype because it takes time and you want to get the money raised and everything. But now it's like, you know, show me something that moves. Uh, but when companies actually get into building, I think it's difficult for us to extrapolate from where we stand right now to imagine what things are going to be like in 12 months after everyone has had a chance to run, teams of people running 5 parallel Claude Code sessions for a year and see what they produce. I mean, maybe some people will have agent psychosis and will like not produce anything of value. So I think there's going to be a lot of slop and stuff that like only makes sense to them and doesn't make sense to anyone else when you go to demo the software, like hyper personalized software that just doesn't have good taste. But I do believe that it is going to be harder and harder to achieve differentiation amid the sea of like new project slop. And so basically, like, I mean, I think even open source is the role and value of open source in this new world is even debatable, because like collaboration in the open source world has gotten much harder. It's you know the AI generated contributions have created a lot of burden for open source maintainers, and so a lot of people are like, I mean, Mitchell Hashimoto just this week put out his Vouch project to create a
Hmm.
system of like credibility amongst open source contributors because of all the overwhelming slop PRs that are coming into Ghosty. And so, I mean, the same problem is going to happen with startups where basically people are going to decide like which companies to pay attention to on the basis of how credible the people are involved. And
Mm,
so if you see people, you know, you're going to be looking at less of like the software they created. You're going to be looking at more at the people involved and asking yourself like, is this somebody that I trust? Is this a person with good taste? Do they have a track record of building solutions that work and building software consistently over a long period of time that works? And I've been building some new stuff with agents, but I'm being very heavy handed in how I manage the agents, and I keep them on track and make sure that they build the right thing. And so when I go into work on a project with agents, like I have a very clear picture in my head of what the software needs to do. And yes, like I'm not reading all of the code. So you could argue that like there's probably some slop hidden in my agent's PRs, but I'm asking a lot of hard questions about like the testing strategy, and like I'm proactively refactoring the tests and doing test driven development and being really rigorous with how I manage the agents. And so I think when people look at a piece of software that I created, or like I've released a couple of new open source projects in the last month, Message Vault and RoboRev. So an email archive and search system, and RoboRev is a continuous code review system for agents. So when people see those projects, they say, "Oh, Wes built these. Like they're probably not slop," and they aren't slop because I've put a lot of work into making sure
Hmm.
that they aren't slop. And so I think that's going to be like the bar. It isn't going to be because people aren't going to be able to look at the product and judge just purely based on the website and the feature list and the documentation whether the product is good or
yeah,
not. It's going to be based on like, are the people involved credible? And even how to like determine that credibility is, kind of a fraught question. And I'm not quite
yeah,
sure what the solution to that is.
yeah. Okay. The second part, because that's a lot to chew on, like already thinking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is the second question I had from going back before that, and it still ties in, I think, here on the credibility. There's been a lot of consolidation in the data market, and in one part you're talking about, oh, this credibility, for the young startup founders getting going, or young at heart. I mean, they're now competing also not just with the big boys who have that credibility baked in, but are also soaking up so many of these other little startups. And you're like, oh,
Yeah.
it's a wildfire. We're going to have like a thousand trees. But that seems,
Yeah. Well,
like five
I
trans
assume
acquisitions.
sure. Yeah. I mean, now like, yeah, Fivetran and Databricks are two of the biggest fishes of them all. Databricks has acquired a ton of companies. Fivetran has acquired a bunch of companies. Once upon a time, we had Census, Fivetran, DBT, and Tobiko Data, like based Tobiko Data, SQL Mesh, duking it out in the market. Now they're all the same company, so that's already like significant consolidation. And I'm sure that Fivetran has made other acquisitions that I'm not aware of. I'm a holder apparently now of Fivetran stock as the result of like all the mergers and acquisitions that have taken place. Like I have a bunch of stock in Databricks also as a result of mergers and acquisitions activity. But yeah, I think that the consolidation is healthy in the sense that the modern data stack, so to speak, and like the modern data stack landscape had got so large and fragmented and confusing that it was creating a weariness amongst like the buyer class, and people that just need to build their data platforms that get things done were kind of just eyes glazing over, like looking at like, oh, we need to choose one of the 40 products available for solving every problem in our data stack. Like Matt Turk is one of the investors that famously created these like comprehensive landscape
Hmm.
diagrams of like where you need a microscope to like look up. It's this gigantic,
Yep.
100 megabyte PDF, and you need a microscope to look up the logos and see like all the different companies and projects that are in all the quadrants of the modern data stack. So I think that the consolidation is really healthy. And I think there were a lot of companies that there was speculation that there was going to be like a massive like mass mass extinction event for startups, especially after the zero interest rate period ended. And so that was like I think back in 2024, 2023, 2024, like that was what I was seeing in the tech media and in venture circles was like, when's the startup mass extinction going to take place? And what happened is that the companies that would have died in the past all pivoted to become AI companies. And so that gave them like a new second win. But like we have the same problem in that there's like for any given problem, think about any given application of AI, there's now dozens or hundreds of companies pursuing some kind of solution for that problem and then living basically in existential fear that like any given week Anthropic is going to release an upgrade to Claude Desktop that kills their product. And there were like already tons of companies that were wiped out by or were forced to pivot by ChatGPT or basically just the innovation that has come rapidly in the foundation models. So I don't know, it's at the same time like I'm really optimistic about there being lots of like mighty small companies, like companies that have outsized impact and influence with really small teams, and not just in the sense of like fastest to 100 million ARR and like kind of there's like seemingly a competition right now about like who can go from 0 to 100 million ARR like faster. And I feel like every week there's like a new record being set,
Mhm.
like the fastest time to 100 million ARR. Uh, but it's like, how sticky is that revenue? Like, is Cursor going to be around in 2 years? Like, I don't know. I mean, I'm not going to bet on it, but like, yeah, I wouldn't bet on it, which is to say, like, I'm not confident that a lot of these companies like this, it feels like a very unstable.
Mhm.
It's not an equilibrium, and it feels very unstable, and the future is hard to predict. I certainly a lot of the value will accumulate to the providers of the foundation models. Now, of course, whether what they're doing is even sustainable and whether CoreWeave will still be around or whether OpenAI will still be around in 5 years, I think basically there's like a financial bubble around AI that could also burst and have significant collateral damage.
Hmm.
And so as a result, like, I'm very bullish on Anthropic, maybe like less bullish on OpenAI. I use all their products, I pay for their subscriptions, but almost certainly like I'm a token whale. Like I consume extraordinary amounts of tokens and I am costing these AI companies a lot of money. And so at some point they're going to have to charge me the true cost of the tokens. And maybe they'll get the token economics such that like they can like my use of Claude Max or my use of ChatGPT Pro, the $200 a month plans. I use I use Codex enough, like just my code review volume is enough to exhaust my $200 a month Codex plan. And so maybe they'll get the token economics to a point where like they're making money off me at $200 a month. Like, I don't know, like tokens have gotten really cheap, but still like based on CC usage, I'm burning, $6,000 a month in tokens on $400 in subscriptions. And so I just don't, it's unclear like how long that's going to be sustainable. Maybe they're sustainable. Maybe there's like a bunch of people who are not burning that many tokens, and so it averages out. But I just don't know. Like it just every day feels like kind of wild and uncertain, and like it's hard not to feel like you're riding a wave, and it's like how long is the wave going to last? Like maybe the wave is, maybe the wave is it's a tsunami. Like what happens like at the end of the wave? Like I don't know. Like are we going to crash into something? Like anyway, so kind of a whole stream of consciousness on that subject. But we're living in a very stimulating time. Like I will say that, and I find it very interesting what's going on, and I hope that we're all having a lot of fun right now. It's unclear that the fun is going to last forever, but I hope that it stays fun as long as possible. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. I definitely feel like I've been able to be a lot more creative, right? Like I would not have been building my own document editor ever, without Claude.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. I'm all for, everybody building, realizing all of their, small and large ambitions and building all the things that they always dreamed of and never could justify taking the time to do. And you can build the project of your dreams during and in between meetings that you're on. Like imagine all those Zoom calls that you've been on where you've never said, you've maybe spoken for 60 seconds out of an hour. And I'm not saying that I've ever vibe coded on a Zoom call, but you can turn unproductive times into productive times now. You can work on projects in parallel while you're waiting on Claude to finish something. You can nudge along, a pet project, a side project, and maybe it's something that makes your day-to-day life 1% better, but that 1%, like, it feels good, and like the cost of building the thing that makes your life a little bit better. Like I was frustrated about using personal finance products, like, and so I was like, I'm just going to build a thing that makes managing my personal finances and categorizing my business expenses like a little bit less horrible. And now like I have a project called Money Flow, and like now I exclusively manage my personal finance through a terminal UI that I built in October. And I never have to click around,
That
um,
software.
a website like mint.com so I've used all the personal finance products. And I think Monarch is probably the best one so
Hmm.
far, but I don't like clicking,
Mm.
and it's built for a different kind of user than me. Like I want something that I can script and automate and that I can use with AI. So that's why I'm like, I can just build the thing that does exactly what I want and makes me productive in the way that I want to be productive. And so, yeah, I'm encouraging everybody to just, yeah, like go ahead and build stuff. There's nothing stopping you.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. We are getting near the end of time. So I want to have like a couple, like few questions. Um,
Sure.
One of which is like, what is the biggest bug that you've shipped in production?
Shipped in production. Like we're talking like heart stopping, like
Oh
drop
yeah.
everything.
Things crash,
Yes.
rollback needed. Yep. Yep.
I'd have a hard time recalling that. I have like a visceral memory of like what it felt like for that to happen, but I can't. Maybe it was so painful that like the memory is not quite seared so directly. But
It's in your somatic system
I'm
only.
sure like I'm sure what I could do is maybe look at like the release history of Pandas and like look for like patch releases that were like the time between like releases was the shortest. And so it was like, you got like some horrible bug report and like basically drop everything until the bug is fixed and you cut a release. But yeah, anyway, so I don't have something more satisfying than that.
Yeah. We'll have to ask Perplexity to go through and find that. Maybe put it in the show notes.
I'm sure. Yeah. I could look at my email and probably find, times when I sent emails that I appeared to be in a state of panic.
If only you have an email search tool now.
Now that you mention
Yeah.
it.
Okay. So I guess one other question before we hit our lightning round. Like we talk a lot about all this kind of the ecosystem, the current AI wave, or if you call it, and then like, but what do you think? Like maybe not 5 years, but in 3 years, what's going to be like laughably outdated about like how we deal with maybe data or anything today?
Well, I mean, I think there's different schools of thought on whether IDEs as a class of software are going away or not. I don't think they're going away, but they're definitely going to be disused. And I actually feel somewhat better about my laziness and that like I didn't adopt an IDE until like the last 2 years when I started working on an IDE project, Positron, which is a
Mm,
fork of VS Code. And it's very difficult to work on VS Code itself or a fork of VS Code without the help of VS Code because they've been kind of built. It's been sort of built to be able to develop itself. And so like developing VS Code from the terminal sounds like kind of one of the most miserable things imaginable. And seeing like the stuff that we built in Positron, like, Data Explorer and different things, I think it's clear that for certain types of use, like data science is one example, that I think an IDE still has tremendous value. But basically, a lot of IDE use in the past was to give you autocomplete and like refactoring and like code based search, like jump
hmm.
to definition, stuff like that. And that was the stuff where I was just never compelled to like use a Python IDE because like I didn't even have LSP like tab complete. Like I just used Emacs and, I just knew what file to open. I don't know. I was kind of a caveman using Emacs. But I feel like now if you look at the vibes on the internet, Like people are just using their Claude Code and a text editor is the way that they're working. So I think that trend will. I think that trend will continue. I don't see like a pendulum swing in the other way towards more visual environments. I think we might see like more visual like canvases for managing and monitoring supervising agents, and so that's maybe
Mm.
something different.
Mm-hmm.
What else might? Yeah, I'm trying to think what else might seem horribly outdated. I don't know. I mean, maybe hard to say. Like maybe even like the terminal UI coding agents. Like maybe we will have moved past that. Like we adopted them very quickly. Like maybe if there's something better that's created, like maybe we'll be just as eager to give them up. Like it's really hard to say.
Right. So basically, like workbench, like pendulum or not pendulum, like between IDE and now terminal. Maybe there's a new, better modality that could happen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is such fun conversation. So before we wrap, we're going to put in the data debug run, quick fire questions, short answers. Are you ready? Okay. So first programming language you love or hated?
Java. I hate it.
Ooh.
Okay. What is your go-to data set for testing any like data related stuff?
Ooh, good question. These days, I guess it's pretty boring, like the New York Taxi data set.
Okay, NYC taxi.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Classic.
What's one lesson outside of tech that influenced how you build?
I mean, I think a lesson from outside of tech.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some inspiration or yeah, other input that.
I think like I think like authors that I really like I really like Kurt Vonnegut, and so I feel like that there's sort of like a kind of an insightful kind of humanist like empathetic aspect of like of his writing that I've always enjoyed, as well as his like kind of not too serious perspective on things, especially some of the later Vonnegut writings, and so I think it's reminded me to like be very empathetic towards all of the humans involved in the software process, while also like not taking it too seriously and trying to have fun, because life is a little bit weird, and often people do take it too seriously.
Yeah.
That's
We're
great.
not getting out anyways. Yeah. Okay. What is, going back to hot takes, what is one hot take you're willing to defend on a podcast?
Maybe aside from some of the ones I've already expressed. Yeah, I'm not sure. I have nothing off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, okay. You've already, mentioned Kurt Vonnegut, but what's like another podcast or book that's not about data that you enjoy?
I like I like Ursula Le Guin's science
Mm.
fiction novels,
Mm.
so Left Hand of Darkness, kind of books like that. I also really enjoy her kind of reinterpretation of the like the Tao Te Ching,
How did you?
kind
Yeah.
of, so that her kind of poetic reinterpretation of that I really enjoy.
We have that book at home.
All right. Final question, tabs or spaces?
Ooh, well, spaces, I guess, but since I'm not writing any code anymore, I'm writing a lot of code in Go, and the agents are using tabs for everything. So I guess maybe I'm a tabs person now, but I'm not sure that I really care anymore. I can set the tab width to 2 spaces or to 4 spaces, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
whatever I like. Yeah.
Right.
Whatever the agents want.
Wow. Thank you so much, Wes. And so before we end, like where can listeners find you? And then what do you encourage people to do?
Well, I have a website, wesmckinney.com, where you can follow my blog ramblings, as well as like my podcast appearances and conference talks, which now have transcriptions and AI summaries along with spicy takes. You can go to spicytakes.org and enjoy that. And of course, I'm putting out new software almost every day on GitHub. And so I'm sure that the recent projects, Message Vault and RoboRev, won't be the last new projects that I create this year. So I'm excited to see what's in store.
Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All
Awesome.
right.
Thanks,
All right.
Wes.
Stay for a bit
Bye.
for this to upload.